Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Sit Down by the Fire. I'm doing this solo. I need to talk to my co-host here. Maybe somebody might be getting fired. um, but I'm here. We're here with a fellow YouTuber who really reviews a lot of fantasy books. Um, so why don't you talk a little bit about yourself and your channel?
Sure. My name is Tiffany. I have a booktube channel that I've had for a couple of years. I started during COVID. It was my COVID channel.
I think a lot of
Um,
people did.
uh-huh.
I think a lot of people started channels in COVID. So
I think a lot of people started a lot of creative things during that time because there was finally time to do it.
and nothing much to do.
And I had actually been teaching for a long time. And so when COVID started and schools had to shut down, I was doing a lot online. I was filming videos for my classes, and I thought, you know what? Filming videos is kind of fun. I should start a YouTube channel. But I
Yeah.
didn't know what it was going to be about. And so, over the thinking of what do I want to talk about? What do I want to take the time to prepare notes, film? What do I care enough about? And there were a lot of things, but I have always loved to read. I think stories are important. Um, and
Mhm.
I really like talking about the characters in the stories. So when I started my YouTube channel, I started doing in depth character studies from fantasy books.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I love fantasy. I mean, Lord of the Rings is
Mm-hmm.
one of J.R. Tolkien's my number one favorite author of all time. So, I mean,
That's my
eh,
Tolkien shelf right there.
yeah, I guess. And and then you've also done some Wheel of Time stuff.
Mm-hmm. Not as much. Here's my Wheel of Time books. So far,
Yeah,
I've only read the first five, so
yes.
I'm not far enough in the
Well,
series to do as
well,
much there.
you're almost to the end. Um,
Like a third of the way.
yeah. And then the books get bigger, and then he describes how the has an entire paragraph about the color of the curtain or something. But
Uh huh. Uh huh.
yeah,
You really get in depth in the world.
yes, and and then what I love about you is also your how much you love the inheritance cycle too. So,
Uh,
which a lot of people, I think, those series get unnecessarily criticized. I mean,
mhm.
it was written by a 17-year-old. You try writing a book at 17 years old. Think about yourself at 17 versus because I don't know if I could write a book at 17. And,
I first read Aragon when I was probably 19 or 20. And I think at the time Eldest was out, but then after I read Eldest, I had to wait for the next two. So I had to, wait the few years until he writes the next one.
right.
So reading them as an adult, I still enjoyed them. And I just reread them in time for Murtag. And reading a series that's meant for younger people when you're a little bit older, I'm 36, I can see what is meant for the younger audience and appreciate it and still enjoy it anyway. And I did still enjoy them anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, I think that having a bad movie adaptation did not help them too much too. But
What movie?
er, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. That's
um,
the joke on Reddit. There is no movie.
there you go. I guess obviously we established you like fantasy. Have you ever do you ever have an inkling to write a book? Or
Yes. So I don't talk about it much, but I was actually, before everything shut down for COVID and before life changed, I was having ideas. I was writing stuff down. I was kind of developing storylines, some world building. Um, and then I don't know. I would say it's hard to find time, which is true, but I find time for YouTube. But I don't know. I know on one hand, okay, I do desire to write my own things, but I feel like I have to be in a season of life where it's not super hard to get into the headspace to do that. So before, when I was taking time for it, I would get up really early before work and have some quiet time and do some typing or even like handwritten in my notebook, which I enjoy doing as much as I enjoy it more than typing, even though it's slower. And then when COVID closed everything, I stopped having to get up for work. So I stopped setting my alarm earlier to get up earlier. And then I had a second child who's 2.5. So
That,
in the season of my life with two young boys who are super active, um, I am deciding that my season of life right now is mom plus some hobbies, and I will get back to writing when it's easier to find some quiet time. That's what
there,
I'm saying right now.
there you go. Who knows? Maybe you could write something just as good as Lord of the Rings someday.
That's
Uh,
everyone's dream.
yes, but okay, with Lord of the Rings, one of the things I've wanted to ask is, because I would like to talk to more booktubers, and
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things I would be curious about, especially people in the fantasy, people are in fantasy. I'm sure you know that J.R. Tolkien was actually working on a sequel to Lord of the Rings.
I'm not sure I knew that. No.
He was working on a sequel. Um, it would have been. He only made it about 13 pages. He kind of went back to it and abandoned it, but then I guess, well, it's one of those things. Sadly, he was. I guess from what I've heard, he had a goal to finish it, but then he died, and
Mm-hmm.
so he only wrote about 13 pages. So I guess one of the things I've been curious about asking other fantasy people, if the Tolkien estate gave permission to another author to continue the sequel, maybe based on his notes, who would you pick?
I would pick no one. I would let it rest.
Yeah, I mean
Partly,
that's what a lot of people are going to say probably. I know I have gotten. If Robert Jordan is still alive, they would like to see him because he's probably the closest to at least an American Tolkien. Not that I'm comparing them, but you know what I mean.
right. Mm-hmm.
But sadly,
I
that
don't
can't
think
happen.
I don't think I could choose anybody that would give it the same. Nobody is Tolkien himself. So nobody is
Right.
going to have the same voice, the same care for detail that he would have had. And if
Yeah,
he had ideas of what he wanted to do, nobody's going to have those same ideas or do it the same way.
and
Um, and I'd hate to see, okay, I haven't read them, but there are a lot of Dune books not written by Frank Herbert. And
yes,
I don't know if I don't know. At some point, it becomes fan fiction instead of a continuation of the actual story. So I don't know how I feel about it, and I haven't read the ones by Brian
right.
Herbert.
They're
Yeah.
I they're okay at best. Um, but
I take it you have read some of them?
I have read some of them, but then it's like you could it kind of made me wonder. I'm familiar with the author who co-writes it with because he writes a lot of Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
adaptations, everything. It's like I don't. I'm not accusing Brian Herbert of anything, but it's like, are you just putting your name on here to make money off your father? And like this guy's writing it, because this is not. I think that there's some. I do think that there is probably somebody out there that would at least care for, and hopefully it won't be like, as I like to call it, Reams of Poop, the TV show that came out on Amazon. So, because, um, but so what are, and the other thing I loved about your channel too is when you said that how you don't like horror movies or horror books because you have a very vivid imagination
Mm-hmm.
in your, you know, you can have dreams about it, which I'm like, you know what? I actually kind of have to appreciate that because obviously we don't want you to have nightmares or something, especially
Right.
having being a mom of two boys, as you just said, and having
Mm-hmm.
mommy sit there start screaming in the middle of the night, or having hubby, you know,
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden like, what's wrong? So
Mm-hmm.
but can you handle any horror stories, I guess, or is it just pretty much all horror?
I generally avoid them. I won't watch anything scary for sure because in a film setting, you get
Right.
actual imagery and sounds.
Hmm.
Um, when reading, I won't read a horror book that's written as a horror book. If a book has some scary parts, I can kind of skim over if I need to,
Yeah.
which I have done before.
Well, yeah. The
Um,
Lord of the Rings has scary elements, so
I don't know if there's anything in there scary enough. I've never had to like skim parts of Lord of the Rings.
oh, that's good
Um,
because the Barrow Downs is pretty creepy. But
yeah, uh, I don't know. It's just, it's not the thing that I want to feed into myself. And if I'm going to spend time taking in a story, why feed the part that's negative?
right,
So I know a lot of times horror gets kind of lumped into the fantasy genre because a lot of times it's fantastical. Sometimes there's aliens, demons, whatever.
yeah.
But
Well,
that's a part of the genre I choose to avoid.
I think it it comes from the story because look at you know fairy stories when they originally came from the Grimm fairy tales. Some of those are pretty dark,
Oh yeah.
have a lot
Hmm.
of great horror elements, but it's not the sole focus of the entire story. So,
Hmm.
I mean, as we were saying before, even Lord of the Rings has some very scary elements. I mean, the Dark Riders are definitely freaky, especially in the book when you can just use your imagination with some of
Hmm.
them. I mean, the hollow voice, just like
I think you're exactly right about that. And I've had similar thoughts about the romance genre. I have trouble reading a romance book, but I appreciate a good romance in a book. Same with horror. Sometimes scary things are part of life, and
right,
so it's part of the story, but it's not, it doesn't have to be the main focus. So if
right.
the book is written to scare
Well,
you, no thank you. If there's
well,
some scary stuff because it happens,
then you have the sappy romances. Like, okay, come on, but like you're borderline on some bad cheese here. So
hmm, that's one of the highest selling genres, though,
yeah,
is romance.
yeah. Well, it's hard to write a good romance novel, is what I would say, because you can
Hmm.
either do Twilight or you can do some big epic romance story. Like,
Hmm.
um, so I guess more kind of curious about your book now. Do you want to talk a little bit about it, or do you want to save it for when that comes?
Oh, I wouldn't even call it a book. It's like some ideas that are together. If anyone who normally watches me were to watch this, I will say that there would definitely be a dragon at some point because that's my favorite type of fantasy with dragons.
Well, I mean, hey, they're pretty awesome, I mean,
Hmm.
and so obviously, I think you like, but that's one thing I did like about your channel is that you just the unabashed love for fantasy, and like I said, starting to read into some series you've recently gotten to. Probably one of the best-selling fantasy authors right now. I heard you recently got into Sanderson. So,
Hmm.
what are some of your favorite books about him so far? With him.
My top favorite of Sanderson is definitely the Stormlight Archive,
Hmm.
and that's where I started reading my Sanderson journey. Um, are you into Magic the Gathering at all?
Um,
The
I've
card game?
I've played it a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not wouldn't call like myself like a big fan, like as you know.
You've dabbled at least.
Yeah, I mean, I never really got much into card games, really. Like, I'm, I'm I we're around the same age. I'm 31, and so like I remember like when Pokemon was big, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, this, I kind of like, I guess my even in elementary school, I'm like, okay, no offense, this is just not for me. So my brain just kind of
Mm-hmm.
like,
No, no worries. We
so
play a lot of Pokemon here because children,
yes,
and it's
well,
and
probably
my
the
husband and I are into magic.
probably the only good thing I mean, your kids could definitely probably watch, especially nowadays. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. So there's this YouTube channel called The Command Zone with Jimmy and Josh, and they talk about magic cards specifically for the format Commander. And at the end of their episode, they always talk about something cool outside of the world of magic. And one time they were like, there's this new book out by this author named Brandon Sanderson. You should check it out. And I thought it sounded really cool, but it was Oathbringer, the third book. And I was like, well, I can't read Oathbringer until I read the first two.
Mhm.
So that was how I discovered Sanderson in the first place. And now I don't know if it shows right there.
You can
That's my Sanderson shelf.
kind of see it. But you know, I mean, I like it. I do like his stuff. He also has a lot of uh, very interesting classes on here on YouTube to like on his
Mm-hmm.
like, how he writes characters and stuff like that. And it's interesting to see his perspective on it. Because
Mm-hmm.
and I love how he admits that he is not the best at telling like writing battles, because usually it's just for movies. When like
Mm-hmm.
people like J.R.R. Tolkien, even Robert Jordan, and some of the great fantasy authors of the past actually spent time in war, so that he feels.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, he does have a good point. I mean, he's okay at writing battles, but like, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I thought that was kind of funny that he. Um, but so the let's see. I guess what you've. What are some other authors that I mean, really appreciate? Like, and I mean, I don't think you've talked too much about it, at least from what I've seen. You haven't really talked too much about C.S. Lewis or anything, from what I've seen. But I haven't gone that far back, So, but,
Yes. So my Chronicles of Narnia,
hmm um,
those are some of the books that got me into fantasy in the first place. They're
yeah.
so nostalgic to me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
still reread them every once in a while. Um,
Yes, and I think those are some ones that definitely need you know you need somebody who actually would care to do it, but like a good movie adaptation, because
mhm,
I like the movies, but they're just lacking that. I just I think that you could tell it was kind of like, hey, Lord of the Rings, let's
I think it's
you can go
the
there.
Lord of the Rings set the bar really, really high.
Yes.
That makes it really hard for any other book to movie adaptation to live up to that standard.
Hmm.
And Peter Jackson can't make every fantasy adaptation.
Yeah, well, you would almost need somebody kind of like what they did with Harry Potter. Basically, probably at least shoot at least a few of them back to back,
Hmm.
because the kids are going to get older.
Kids grow. Yep.
So you're going to need somebody like that, and like have an actual big plan with it, because sadly I think the best thing to do with Narnia right now is honestly just to reboot. you know
Yeah. Yep.
because
It's hard for any studio to want to take on something with that many books
yeah,
because things get canceled so easily. Oh, it didn't do well, cancel it. And I'd love to see the whole thing get done.
yes, I would too. And it's sad when basically the only good adaptation of Narnia is the original ones, where the beavers are dressed in costumes, and you can kind of tell a little. where
I
you
don't
have
know that I ever watched those. I have a vague memory of some really old adaptation where they tried really hard to use CGI to make the centaur's upper body connect to the
right.
lower body, and it was so choppy. And
Y-
I don't that's the only scene I remember. I don't think I
The
watched any older ones.
there's Narnia stories from the 80s and 90s, and they use the beavers are literally guys in costumes, and you can definitely tell.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's awesome because later on they got Tom Baker from Doctor Who to play Puddleglum, which is like
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
which is like the it's like the perfect amount of casting,
Mm-hmm.
and so watching it later on, and then it's just interesting to watch it because they literally couldn't afford another actress because it was you know very low budget, so they literally got
Mm-hmm.
the same actress to play the White Witch, and then later on they got her to play the Lady in a Green Kirtle. So they literally hired the same actress, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
you can kind of tell. So it's like, are they saying that the White Witch and the Lady in a Green Kirtle are the same
That
character?
would be confusing because if you're just watching and you've never read the books, you'd be like, is she reincarnated? What's going on here?
Yeah, or what? Yes, but I mean, I just watched a documentary about a guy who inspired J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis definitely, and all the Inklings because they always would talk about him.
Mm-hmm.
George MacDonald was his name, fantasy author from the 1880s. So,
Oh.
and it was kind of just how he's gotten very underrated in recent years because people always focus on those guys, which
Mm-hmm. The ones that came after. Yep.
right. And I'm like, man, I want to recheck out some of his books. But yeah, I think that is one thing that Narnia definitely needs. And then, with studios not really, I feel like they would censor a lot of things that is needed in the Narnia books, and
Mm-hmm.
we know what I'm talking about. The key element to it, and
Mm-hmm.
but I do think that honestly, I mean, sadly, I think unless they got the rights sold, I think Disney owns it 100% now because I think
Really?
because I think Disney distributed the first two, Fox distributed the other one, so then
Hmm.
it's Disney owns it 100%, and ooh.
If any corporation takes over the world, it's going to be Disney.
Well, they own
Uh,
they own about 65% of Hollywood, so they're past
that's
monopoly.
a high percentage.
Well, so yeah, they're actually legally past monopoly. So,
Uh,
but
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
well, so do you we've established you like fantasy. What are some other genres that you really geek out about? Like you mentioned Dune. You have
Mm-hmm.
which so science fiction definitely too.
I do like science fiction. Sometimes I like older science fiction when it was a little more, I don't know, when it was more mystical and we
Right,
didn't know so much, so it was easier to imagine
right, because we're
more fantastical things.
right.
Um, I don't, so I do like science fiction. I tend to prefer to watch science fiction via film with the imagery. I just think it lends itself better to film than to books. Um,
Right,
so I really like Star Trek, Star Wars, all those things. I do like Dune. I'm not big into reading action sequences. So,
right,
like a space battle, really cool to watch, not as fun to read about.
right. I mean, I do like reading some science fiction, but I do kind of see your point. Like, I think that sword fights with blades, not light blades, are more fun to
Mm-hmm.
see rather than to because.
Mm-hmm.
But I see your point with that, and I do. I did like the new Dune. Definitely, I can't wait for Dune Part Two.
Me too. Yep, go on opening day.
There you go. And I hopefully I can go opening day because I just want to see I just want Dune to be successful because I want to see
Hmm.
all the books be adapted, all the maybe the main Herbert ones, and then you can go back to the prequels if you need to make if the students need to make more money. Um,
Hmm.
but no, I mean because my thing is I just want to see. I don't think Denis Villeneuve's going to do it because I think he said he's done after Children of Dune. But I would love to see some director attempt to do God Emperor of Dune because it's like, man,
Giant worm creature.
yeah.
uh,
I would hope that some director would actually attempt to make that practical too. Like
I could see it being animated.
that would be,
Sometimes those things that are a little too out there and a little too weird for real life can work really well for animation. Like Attack on Titan,
yeah.
giant Titan things
Hmm.
works
Well,
really well animated.
yeah, I don't. Well, or you could since God Emperor of Dune is just so weird. Like, it could just be really weird if you do it live action, but then like the God Emperor is animated or something like that. You know, because
Yeah, yeah,
that book
CGI's come a long way. That's
that
true.
book is well that book I mean it's weird in a good way and you kind of have to wonder what was Frank Herbert doing when he was writing that.
Living in his imagination.
Maybe. um but I don't know even know a director now that could even do Dune besides Denis Villeneuve. I hope that like at least he would produce it, maybe be at least an advisor or something,
Hmm.
because I mean I don't I don't know. Like you would need a director who's a little weird to make out Emperor Dune, but weird in a good way. So
Someone who can embrace the weirdness. Yeah.
yes, and I don't I don't know. Well, I really hope that the Dune stuff is successful. I guess one of the things I was going to ask if so you you ever checked out any of the John Carter books?
Yes. So that is some of the older science fiction I used to enjoy a lot.
Yeah,
I So Edgar Rice Burroughs is an author I read a lot of when I was much younger, like middle school, high school.
yeah,
And I don't know if I want to go back and read him now because when I think back to his stories, there's a lot of things that would obviously be sexist, racist. Um, besides the science part not holding up, I've learned a lot about storytelling in the last few years, and a lot of his stories revolve around the girl is getting chased, and the guy has to chase the one who's chasing her, and there's a lot of repetitiveness, and there's a
right,
lot of, oh, this problem has just come up, and the main character just happens to be revealed now that he needs it, that he has a skill that can exactly solve the problem, but we never knew that leading up to it. Um, so
right.
I don't know if they would hold up to me now.
He's he's I've noticed that like I think he's I mean the Princess of Mars was his first book, so for a first attempt at a book, it's pretty good. And I think he did get better, once he started to
I
actually.
think he got better for a while, and then even when I was reading them when I was younger, I got this sense of like cynicism from him. Like he was just tired of telling stories and tired
Well,
of life. I don't know.
I think that we're, he, I think a lot of it was he fought. He was. I think that people, well, from what I've heard, people have had, really studied Burroughs and everything, said that the war kind of really had an effect on him because
Hmm.
he was actually in Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked. So he saw those.
I didn't know that, but that makes
He,
perfect sense.
he saw it firsthand. So then he kind of took a break, not necessarily a break, but less of a break than writing. Not he was not prolific because he was a war correspondent, so he was not necessarily fighting in the war, but I think it kind of
Hmm.
definitely had an effect on him. So I think he just kind of got to the point where I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And then because he died like a few years after the war, so
Mm-hmm.
so I think that that had an effect on him too. But
Oh, I'm sure.
one of the things that built with Burroughs, though, one of the things I love is that if you kind of think about it, he was basically the father of what Marvel's doing in right now with this cinematic universe. He was kind of the father of that in some ways because I can't think of another author that did that really before that.
Like going out to all those planets, the center of the earth, the
Right.
strong man who rescues the damsel.
Yeah, I mean, and those can be fun stories too, but we need to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that that's another thing. I think the movie, like, sadly, who knows if there'll be another movie because the movie is the biggest flop ever.
Which one? The John Carter movie?
Yes,
Mm.
yeah, it cost I think $300 million, which
Mm.
and only made like 25 or something.
Oh,
Biggest, it's like one of the biggest flops of all time. So, but no, I've enjoyed them, but like I do see people's criticism with them. I'm not one of those people like, oh, it was the time and everything. Like, I get it, I mean,
mm-hmm.
but I think that if you made a screen adaptation, maybe that's one great thing about screen adaptations. You can always kind of improve on the story a little bit if it has
Mm-hmm.
flaws, and like even I mean, only so I think that's something that could be looked at, and even even some of the later Tarzan books. Like I tell people, no, Tarzan was cool in the books. I mean, he fought dinosaurs,
Mm-hmm.
with his
Yeah.
bare hands. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and and even even some of the movie adaptations have made Jane a better character than she was in the books. Like
But like the Disney animated one.
yeah, well, even the early Tarzan stuff, the Johnny Weissmuller and Marina Sullivan, she was pretty strong in those movies. So
I have not watched any of them.
well, I would check him out. Like she's yeah, she's a she is a housewife and everything else, and but she's strong in a not like an Ellen Ripley way, but
Mm-hmm.
she's pretty strong and very independent. And this is we're talking 1930s, so
Mm-hmm.
very and so. But I mean, what are some? Is there anything else you really any other books that you really just geek out about that you really love, or if it kind of pretended that people don't really know your channel too much. I know it, so just trying to
Right.
give you some more subs. So
Sure. So I'm not too picky, and it was around the time that I was starting this channel that I started to kind of look out more at what there was out there.
mhm.
Um, because I was kind of in like a reading slump and I needed some books to read. And so I found YouTubers talking about books.
Mhm.
And so some of these authors I had read a lot beforehand when I was younger. So Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, um, Raymond E. Feist. I liked Feist beforehand. And he's still writing, he's still putting out new books. I really like his magician books.
Mhm.
I recently discovered Brian McClellan. Heather Fawcett has uh, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which is a lot of fun. It's very scholarly. Um, oh, Robin Hobb. A long time ago, I had read the Live Ship Traders trilogy and really liked it. And then I just never continued. I knew there were more books in that series, and I just never, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know why I never continued. I think it was because when I looked at what other books she had written, they weren't directly following those same characters. A different set of characters, different location.
Right.
Um, so I recently read the Farseer trilogy, and then I reread the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and then I'm going to continue on.
There you
Um,
go.
Robert Jordan. What else? Oh, and then recently Michael Miller. I'm only a little bit into his first book, Ascendant from Songs of Chaos. It's very reminiscent of Aragon and the Dragon Riders of Pern. So we'll see.
Hey,
Still reading those.
yeah. Well, Robert Jordan, I've read some of his books that before he wrote Wheel of Time, because he wrote Conan books,
Hmm.
and I mean, those are interesting to read too, because of the, I mean, you can definitely tell that this guy had something in him that's not based on the limits of what he could do with Conan and
Mm-hmm.
Wheel of Time. I mean, I tried watching the television adaptation. Like,
The most recent one.
yeah, I kind of just skipped the second season. I'm like, the first season kind of for me it was just like, this is just,
It was beautiful to watch. It
yeah,
looked good, but
it didn't have it didn't have the key element that you would need to make Wheel of Time that Lord of the Rings had. It didn't have that verisimilitude factor to me. And
I'm sure they were trying to make it not too similar to the Lord of the Rings.
I think,
I noticed that there was a lot of color in the
yeah,
design,
hmm,
which I thought was interesting because the Aes Sedai are color based.
right. It was trying. I give it that. I will say I did like some of the casting decisions. Like Rosamund Pike, I thought was good,
Mm-hmm.
but like I felt like the actor that played Rand was kind of like not kind of acting like the worst parts of Hayden Christensen in the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And
So I know someone who looks a lot like the Rand actor, and
yeah,
it's not someone that I enjoy being around that much. And
oh,
so I didn't necessarily enjoy watching the scenes with
yeah,
Rand.
yeah. No, I mean, hey, no, I mean, not all gingers are bad. So, um, but no, she's. I don't know. It's just one of those things that I felt like a lot of the decisions were like. I really think that. I mean, I I I know some people said, "Oh, I want to see a movie." I'm like, okay, a movie for the Wheel of Time to do each and every book. I mean, no studio is ever going to fund that because you would have to probably plan on at least replacing the actors every few years
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, I mean, I could, the only way I could see it is if they sit there, do something like what they did with Lord of the Rings, where, oh, let's fund 3 movies. And if these are successful, then we do the 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to really have to divide it up, is how I would only see it. And I don't know. I guess since you're big into the inheritance cycle. One of the things I did want to ask, um, they're probably going to be remaking the movie at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any casting decisions?
No, I I'm never, I won't say never. It's hard as a reader to accept someone else's choice for how a character should look,
Right,
and no real person is going to perfectly fit what you've imagined as you're reading.
right.
And I'm not one of those people who fan casts because they're never going to choose who I pick.
You
And
never,
then I'll think, well, I'd like this character to look just like this person.
you never know.
And
Maybe
and
somebody.
to be honest, I'm not sure I keep up with media well enough now to know who some of the up and coming actors are.
Right.
Someone to play Aragon who they probably wouldn't get a 15-year-old, they'd probably get like a 18, 19,
I mean,
20 to play him.
I mean,
And I don't know.
we don't. I mean, maybe like we could think. I mean, the only good thing about that movie is just get Jeremy Irons back as Braun. And then
He's not my favorite choice for Brom. That's what everyone says, that he's the only good thing about it. But
he's
that's not how Brom is described in the book.
yeah, yeah, but
Jeremy Irons is too handsome.
also I don't.
He's not wizened with a long nose.
Right. I mean, I mean, Jeremy Irons though, like he's one of those actors though, like it doesn't matter if the movie's not necessarily good. He's one of those actors that I'm going to be winning an Academy Award. So, so
Maybe he stands out as being so good in that movie because the rest of it was not good.
yes. So maybe that's something you can do on your channel. Do a Aragon the movie rant, right?
No one would watch it because supposedly the movie doesn't exist.
I guess so. But
It could be fun if they do remake it to like compare. Like, what did this one do right or wrong versus
right,
what this one did right or wrong?
right. I do. I mean, I would be interested to see what he would do. What they would do with a new because I would be interested, but like I think that yeah, I don't know. I mean, as far as like Aragon and everything, I would just say get an unknown that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know for Brahm. Like, I mean, I guess he kind of has a big nose. Get Clive Owen, but he's.
Things like a big nose can be added with makeup and stuff.
I mean, you could always make actors look ugly too. So with makeup. So
Well, not that he's described as being ugly either. I
yeah,
don't know. I just imagined a more wizened, older, graybeard type of, I don't know, Gandalf type character, I guess.
yeah, but more of a badass Eric Gandalf, pretty much. Even though Gandalf was pretty badass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but hey, I guess go sub to Tiffany Russell. She'll you can leave a comment down below so people can click on you and anything you basically want to plug, I guess.
I don't know if I have any good plugs besides myself. uh, Booktubers that I watch a lot of Daniel Green, Elliot Brooks. I have discovered a couple more homeschool mom booktubers. So when I come leave a comment, I might say their names because there
Okay.
doesn't seem to be a lot of us. The moms
Well,
who homeschool their kids who also make booktube videos.
there needs to be definitely more of the moms out there who make booktube and who definitely homeschool kids because homeschool moms are awesome. So
Thank you.
well, hey, I mean, somebody has to teach the kids right. So we're not going to get into it too much, but we know the schools don't do it. So
uh, Thank you for that point of view. I think homeschooling is becoming a lot more accepted nowadays. As the schools get worse, homeschooling just seems better.
yes, well, the only thing that like I think that you know um, eventually the kids would have to like maybe put them in clubs and stuff like that so that at least they can develop social skills. Because that's sometimes with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of kids who are homeschooled they lack social skills. So like I said, maybe eventually they can join clubs or something so they can actually
Oh, there's plenty of stuff out there. Yeah.
oh yeah and you know I so I think you can plug them to give them shout outs if you want to. What were some of those moms again?
Oh, I don't remember their names. I'm really bad with names. I'm bad
Oh,
with names in real life and in the books I read. So when I'm filming a video, I'll often pause and look.
yeah. Well, just you could always write. I don't know. You could always get a crappy notebook and start writing it down. I've literally had this
Uh,
thing since I've literally had this thing since high school, but they don't really make these sturdy ones anymore. So I'm like having to always duct tape it and everything else. Um, but so yeah, well, I will. So definitely sub to Tiffany's channel. I started watching her and like, oh, yeah, I'll just reach out to her because for this interview because you're you have more subs than me, but anything to do to help both of us. So
Thank you for inviting me. It was really exciting to get the invite and to talk a lot about fantasy books and
yeah,
sci-fi books.
and sci-fi, and
And
who knows?
adaptations.
Yeah, well, maybe you can start getting some more time to actually write your book, because hey, who knows? Maybe you can be as detailed as Tolkien and literally write yourself in your own moon cycle.
Oh, we'll see. That would take so much note taking. Oh man.
Well, look how many notes he took. He didn't even finish his.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he only got like what, like he barely finished even the fourth age. Like I think the fourth age has like what, maybe 200 years or something like that. And I'm just
I'm not sure. I'm
I
not a Tolkien historian.
need well, I mean, I'm not as much as I would. I would. I wouldn't call myself a scholar. I know about Tolkien. I, I
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot about him, but like there's people who know far more than me about Tolkien,
Uh-huh.
and like, gosh, yeah, I think it was literally like almost 200 years, maybe 300 at best, of the fourth age, and he never finished his. So who knows? Maybe you could be like J.R.R. Tolkien and write a fantasy story for America, like he did for England. So
Well, thank you, Ty. I appreciate that.
no problem. Yeah, so who knows? We might be talking to T.R.R. Russell. All right, so go sub to her. So when this will premiere, and she'll leave a comment and everything, so you guys can click on her, and check her out, because you know I like to listen to some of the booktubers, and you're definitely one of the good ones. Because I enjoyed like how you like your unabashed love for the inheritance cycle. Those dudes get a lot of unnecessary hate. So
Well, thank you very much. It was fun to come, and thank you for having me.
no problem. All right. Bye bye.
Bye.